It's the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.
So we got three topics today. First off, March Madness. Baylor wins their first championship in school history. And then the big news in sports, the Sam Darnold trade. And then to wrap up, we'll talk about the New York Mets because we know, shout out to Declan for this quote, but there's three guarantees in life. Death, taxes, and the Mets blowing at the DeGrom lead. So to start, we'll talk about March Madness. Chuck, what are your takeaways about March Madness and Baylor winning their first championship and Gonzaga getting spoiled for their perfect season?
Listen, I always like when the favorite loses, because we always want to see the underdog win, but my heart hurt for Gonzaga. They've been like almost there so many times, especially Mark Few, who has built up that program as a mid-major, competing with all these, powerhouse conferences and schools, but yet he just can't get over the hump. And we all thought that this was the year that Few would have made the leap into, the stardom, of, a high profile coach who's won a national championship, and his team picked the absolute worst time to play their probably their worst game of the season without a doubt. And it just sucks, man. But shout out to Baylor. What Scott Drew has done, taking over that program, I think in 2013, maybe 2008. I forgot what year he took it over, but they were coming off like NCAA sanctions. Like it was a mess. And he built that program up to where it is now. So shout out to him. And my heart just hurts for Zaga and Zaga Nation.
I mean, Baylor deserved it. They were the better team yesterday, and it wasn't even close. I mean, they came out of the gates physical, and it seemed like Gonzaga had no match for them. I feel like it always ends up going this way. When a team in any sport, football, we see it all the time. When you're having a perfect season, your very last win before that perfect season is over is a last-second miracle where you win the game, which is what Gonzaga did in the Final Four against UCLA. Go to overtime, hit a bank bomb three for the win. That was like the last string that they had for that perfect season. But again, not only does it always go like that, in March Madness, when do we really see like the true best team in the tournament win the tournament? Because they don't. I mean, we see Duke in 2019 when they were like, it's like, oh, are you going to take Duke or the field? And everyone was so high on Duke. They almost got bounced in the round of 32 for crying out loud against UCF. Then you see the days Kentucky was that top dog. You see the days UNC was. And it's like those teams who are that top seed, like the best team in the tournament, have so much pressure on them to deliver. And I feel like they always get knocked out earlier than expected. But I mean, Gonzaga did make the final two, and they were regarded as clearly the best team they led the country in scoring. They were one of the best defensive teams in the country. And then, but last night, the better team won. Baylor was hot. They played more physical, and they simply get outbeaten. And then, I mean, shout out to Baylor. I mean, that was a special performance.
Yeah, and I think the reason why the favorite never wins in college basketball is because it's just a one and done. There are no series where, you can make the adjustments by game 3 and game 4. It's kind of like the NFL playoffs, but, it's on steroids because you got 68 teams, all competing in the same tournament. But, I mean, yeah, Zaga, they played their worst game. And I think what's gone unnoticed really is that Corey Kispert, who, was kind of like playing himself into maybe a potential lottery pick in the NBA, he played terrible. He couldn't hit a three to save his life. And I think Zaga really screwed up by not, feeding Timmy down low. I think Timmy would have overmatched Vital and Thamba. So I'm a little surprised that they didn't do that. And they didn't do it in the UCLA game either. So I really want to know why Few decided to go away from one of his better players. But listen, Baylor, that was probably, their best game they played all year. They had the clamps on defensively, and the way that they played, closing out and everything, they made every possession difficult. So just shout out to Baylor, really. And that's all I got to say. It was a great tournament. Happy we had it back. Shout out to the NCAA. Most of the time, we're all hating on them for dumb things that they do, but this was one thing that they got right. The bubble move, one city, and we saw a phenomenal tournament.
For sure. It's always good to see a tournament. We saw a bunch of upsets, things that we've seen every single tournament, but especially with the no home court advantage, we've seen teams really get knocked out earlier than we expected. I mean, Ohio State was supposed to be a Final Four team. I mean, Illinois, people had them winning the tournament, including myself. I'm not going to talk about that. But besides the fact, I mean, the amount of upsets we had, the amount of the miracles we had, it was an unbelievable tournament. And again, yeah, shout out to Baylor. They deserved it. They were the better team. They came out more physical. They made every single possession more difficult from Gonzaga. But that's going to wrap up in terms of March Madness talk. The big news and what I really want to take most of today's show about, Sam Darnold, he's out. A few things with this. I mean, the Jets trade Sam Darnold to the Carolina Panthers for a second-round pick, a fourth-round pick, and a sixth-round pick. Chuck, take it away. What are your thoughts?
I mean, the writing was on the wall once Gase got fired and a new regime came in. I mean, we see in the NFL all the time when teams go out and hire, a new general manager, new head coach, new offensive coordinator, the whole 9 yards. They want their guy. And unfortunately for Sam, he was part of the old regime that's no longer around. So there's no, ties to him. So once they got the number 2 pick, I think Douglas really, went to LaFleur and said, listen, this is what you want to do. Who fits your scheme the best? And I guess we got the answer that it'll be Zach Wilson. And once they determined that, Wilson was healthy with the shoulder injury and everything, they had to make the move to move Sam because you weren't going to keep Sam on the roster. That would just be stupid. So Douglas did what he did. He moved Sam and got a couple of picks. Listen, it's a good move for both teams, and I'm really happy Sam went to Carolina. I think Matt Rule is going to be a tremendous head coach. Joe Brady, we've seen what he's done with Joe Burrow already. I really want to see what he does with Sam. And the Panthers are kind of like the Jets of 2 years ago, who didn't hire Rule because they have airheads who run the organization. So I want to see what a Rule-Darnold relationship could have been, and we finally get to see it. So basically the Panthers are the 2018 Jets of an alternate universe.
Right. A few things to this. I guess you could say bittersweet. So to start, I mean, in terms of Darnold and the Jets, I think both parties needed to split ways because the Jets ruined him, which they are really famous for doing that. They know how to ruin quarterbacks better than any team in NFL history, to say the least, with the Browns being a close second. But that's besides the point. First things first, the Jets are the only team in NFL history. And when you put the Jets in only team in NFL history, it's never something good. They are the only team to draft. Well, after this upcoming draft, they will be the only team in NFL history to draft a quarterback within the top 3 picks in a span of 4 years. That is completely embarrassing. That's disgusting. That's embarrassing. That in the 2018 draft, the Jets moved up 3 spots to get Sam Darnold, traded 2 second-round picks, and the second Sam Darnold was drafted, all social media, all Jets Nation, we finally found our guy. The drought is over. It took so long to find him. Now we finally did. Carrying on, all to trade him 4 years later. Are you kidding me? Really? And then not only that, since 2011 to 2018, not one player that the Jets drafted in the first round is on the current roster right now. That is completely pathetic. And 2019 is going to be pretty close because Quinnen Williams doesn't look too promising, and I expect him gone really soon. So with that being said, it just shows how pathetic Mike Maccagnan has been in terms of drafting and just what the Jets make of their draft picks. Since 2011, I mean, the only guys who were really promising in terms of talent were Muhammad Wilkerson in 2011, and then Jamal Adams until they ended up trading him in terms of pure talent. And then after that, they've really never shown any talent or first-round talent, to say the least, since then. But I guess I like the move to move Sam Darnold because, I mean, it would be his third new coaching staff in 4 years. I mean, they basically ruined him. But I think the Carolina Panthers got themselves a franchise quarterback and a quarterback who will be a top 15 quarterback in this league, if not a top 10 quarterback. He now has Christian McCaffrey in the backfield, a better coaching staff with Joe Brady in the mix, reconnecting with Robbie Anderson, which an undrafted New York Jet happened to be a great wide receiver. Of course, they let him go. You got DJ Moore, and they have some pieces around him. So this is going to be the first time we really see Darnold with some sort of talent because he hasn't had in 3 years. We don't know how a good coaching staff could develop him. and to say the least, have some talent around him, because that's another thing that Sam Darnold has never had around him. Sam Darnold was 13-25 as the New York Jets starting quarterback. That looks bad, right? Well, without him, since 2018, they've been 0-10. So, I mean, how much slander does he really deserve? I feel like the Jets in 2020, at least, have had every problem except him. I think he was the only thing that wasn't the problem. But when your offensive line was so disgraceful, when your running game was in the toilet, you banked on a 55-year-old Frank Gore. You didn't even have a number 4 wide receiver as your number 1. You had the worst coaching staff imaginable. I mean, he couldn't have been in a worse situation. But the thing I do like about moving him, your best ability is your availability. Darnold has missed an extended period of time, 3 years and 3 straight seasons in his 3-year career. Like, I want my quarterback to be available. But I think it looks safe to say that the Jets will be drafting Kyle Wilson. I mean, what do you think in terms of, you're more of a college guy than I am. What do you think of who they should get at the number 2 spot? Is Zach Wilson that guy?
You know, while you were rattling off all the Jets, mishaps over the past decade, I was trying not to laugh because it just goes to show how inept they were. We had hiring, John Izzik, and then going from Izzik to Mac McCagney. That was like, going from like worse to worser, if that's even like a word that I could use. And it's sad, but I think finally they're on the right path of, building through the draft, stop with these, quick patches that are just going to, blow up in our faces in 2 to 3 years. And I think it's a good fresh start for everybody. But Joe Douglas is ready to go out and draft his guy. He's got Rob Saleh on board. He's got LaFleur on board. And I think they're going to go with Zach Wilson. That's where it is in the media. I really hope that they don't take Mac Jones at 2. If they take Mac Jones at 2, I haven't decided what I'm going to do yet, but I will be pissed off. Like, I might put a hole in the wall. I might, start swinging at anybody. Like, I would be so pissed off. I don't know what I would do. I do like Wilson. He's shown phenomenal talent. And I know people can argue and say that he doesn't play anybody because he went to BYU. He's not playing against SEC schools, Big 12 schools, Big 10 schools, whatever. But, you could make that argument, but then you got to look at it on the other side. And who is he playing with on offense then? He's playing on guys who are going to be future, accountants or real estate agents. He's not playing with top, NFL talent that other, like, Trevor Lawrence is playing with, first-round guys. Justin Fields is playing with first-round guys.
Mac Jones,
yeah, right, exactly. Mac Jones had the Heisman winner. You know what I mean? Joe Burrow, look at all the talent he played with his senior year at LSU. So, but I also do like Justin Fields, and I don't understand why, people are so down on him. I understand, he has holes in his game, but so does everybody else. And I really think, the Patriots are behind trying to get, this bad rap out on Fields so that way he starts falling so that way they don't have to trade into the top 5 and, can make the move into the top 10. But if they go with Fields or Wilson, I'll be happy about it. I really do like Trey Lance, but I think Trey Lance is more of what Patrick Mahomes went to, where you have a playoff team or close to a playoff team that needs, a future quarterback, and they're able to sit him for a year. And that's why I think San Francisco traded up to get Lance, because they could roll with Jimmy G, who took them to a Super Bowl. Yes, he's not the best option, but they went to a Super Bowl with him. So you roll with Jimmy G, let Lance sit, and then, then you have him in a year or two. But, I mean, if they go with Fields or Wilson, I'll be happy about it. It looks like Wilson is the pick. I'm glad with it. He's a phenomenal athlete. That's what you want. And I think he'll fit LaFleur's scheme well. I think that's what it comes down to. Fit and scheme with these quarterbacks. Because if you have a bad quarterback going into a bad situation like Sam Darnold, it's not going to play out well. And I think it's the new NFL where if you're drafted in the top 5 or whatever and you don't succeed right away, teams are going to move on from you. And it started with Josh Rosen. He went in the top 10, I believe, the year prior, and then he was traded a year later after only playing in a handful of games. That's what the NFL is. What can you do for me now? And it's so important to have a young quarterback on a rookie contract. That's what teams are trying to do.
He is 23 years old. We've seen he has a lot of talent. Out of the draft, he was regarded as the best quarterback in that draft class, which the team around him set him up for failure. So, of course, he's going to fail. And it's not out of the question that he is the most talented quarterback in that draft class. I think right now, as in terms of evidence that we've seen, it's clearly Josh Allen, and it's not even close. Yes, including Lamar Jackson. But in terms of getting rid of him, if the Jets keep Darnold, then they have such more leverage in terms of drafting back a little bit and getting Devonta Smith to give Darnold the number one option. And you could have more leeway in terms of building around him and not having to really scramble to develop another quarterback, which, again, we don't know how he's going to be. I mean, all year long, the talk was Trevor Lawrence, then a long second was Justin Fields. Now Zach Wilson had that monster pro day. Now it's like, oh, Zach Wilson's that guy. So, how really promising is that? But I just think if the Jets kept Darnold, that second pick could have been really useful, whether they've used it for a guy like Devonta Smith or they traded back to get even more high leverage picks. Look what the Jets did in 2018. They were the 6th pick, moved up to the number 3 pick, and the Colts got 2 second-round picks. Like, that's a lot for moving 3 spots that really, for the Colts, they had no loss for it. So many teams are desperate for quarterbacks, and if the Jets just wanted to move back a few spots, the Jets could have moved back for all I care 2 spots. That's probably 2 second-round picks right there. And you're still having a top 4 pick. What's better than that? What the Jets got for Darnold and what they really did to acquire him, I think they kind of lost it. A second-round pick, a fourth-round pick, and a sixth-round pick. Let's call a spade. How valuable is that? Come on now. It's not. It's really not. A sixth-round pick is don't give me the Tom Brady thing, pick, or a Chris Carson or an Antonio Brown. That is hit. That's like hitting lotto. That's hitting like a 9-team parlay. Sure, it happens. It's not going to get a 9-team parlay. It's not going to happen. A 4th-round pick. What are you going to get out of that? And a 2nd-round pick. It looks sexy on paper, but in reality, what are you really doing with it? Come on now.
Yeah, I think what hurt the Jets the most with everything is that in the beginning it was basically Lawrence, then Fields as like the number 2, and then an unknown. But then Wilson played himself into a top 5 pick. Lance, is really highly regarded among scouts, even though he only played in 1 game, over the past 2 years, I believe, because of COVID. And, Mac Jones came along. Kyle Trask is another guy who might go in the back end of the first round. So there are options there for teams who need quarterbacks. And I think that's what hurt the Jets the most, because there isn't as much, supply and demand within the quarterback situation. But I think with the new GM, think about it, Douglas is only on the contract for 5 years. So last year, I believe, was his first year, if I'm not mistaken, or whatever. So he's only got, 2 or 3 years left on his deal. So you got to know when to strike and to get your guy. You want to bring your guy in because his job is on the line. You want to succeed as soon as possible, and he's going to build up his team through the draft. Now, with that being said, you could make the argument, yes, you could have kept Darnold, traded back, see what he could have done in a new system, and whatnot. But then you're taking like such a huge risk, especially if Wilson Fields go on to become prominent NFL quarterbacks. And next year's QB class, as of today, I know things can change over the course of a year, but next year's QB class it's a little shaky, I will be honest. And no prospect stands out as, yes, I want that guy. He's, a home run. Right, exactly. So I think it was good for them to start listen, we even said it before the season started, and I even said that this is a 4-12 team at most, and they ended up going 2-14. So it was good for them to just blow the whole thing up, start new quarterback and a new system. They have 50 billion draft picks between this year and next year, and that's what you want to do. And I think that's why Douglas aimed for having picks next year, because you don't want to put all your eggs into the same basket. They have now, I believe, 10 picks in the first 3 rounds between this year and next year. So if a prospect, if suddenly there's a can't-miss prospect and the Jets are terrible again next year, which if they are, then, they have the option to move back. They could do what the Dolphins did. Dolphins traded out of 3 because they have Tua. They don't need a quarterback. Hopefully the Jets get that same deal next year where they get, 3 first-rounders for, a top 5 pick and just keep building capital. But if there's a guy next year who shoots up the draft boards, the Jets could trade up and get that guy. They have the capital now. Douglas has flourished, the cupboard of, draft picks, and that's what teams love draft picks without a doubt, and that's what he's going to build through the draft. They still need a cornerback, they still need an outside linebacker, still need a receiver, you need offensive guards, and that's what they're going to do. They're going to build it through the draft. We saw with Mike Maccagnan, how many times did he spend because he couldn't pick any, like the guy can't even pick his nose, like he was so bad at drafting. And we saw a time, and you just mentioned all the draft picks that flopped. Like, it was just crazy. But I think building through the draft and then filling your holes through free agency is the route, however you want to pronounce it, is the way to go without a doubt.
I mean, since 2008, the Jets have not had a draft pick in the first round that was on the roster more than 5 years that I can remember. What is since Vernon Golston? Maybe that was the bust of the bust that the Jets have, and then a close second's got to be Calvin Pryor. But I mean, it's like a 1980 Toyota Corolla versus a 1985 Honda Civic. I mean, pick your poison at that point. But the Jets just really have just nothing going in terms of their draft stock. I thought that Maccagnan did a decent job in free agency most years when he took over in 2015. I mean, 2015, at 2014 they went 8-8. No, they went. They had a brutal year. I think they went 6-10. Right. 2014 they went.
So, yeah.
And then Maccagnan flipped that around, acquired Fitzpatrick, then Marshall and Decker on the outside, who had monster years, and they were 10-6. And then Fitzpatrick choked in Week 17. But I mean, they were right there between. I thought in 2015 they were a top team in the NFL. And then in 2016, people went back. Oh, should he bring back Fitz or should he bring back Geno or to just have Geno Smith take over? And Fitzpatrick was the right answer, even though I think, again, there was no right answer there because I think both would have turned out the same way. But the right thing to do was bring back that team you had in 2015 because they're one of the best teams in the league. And then what he did in free agency, and then after 2016, he blew it up and then started over. 2017, they were a little bit better than expected. They were projected to go 0-16. They ended up going 5-11, and like they were competitive. I think every year free agency, he did what he had to do. It was just the drafting was brutal. And I always tried to give him a pass for the drafting, but the drafting was really bad. But I thought free agency, he always did what he did. He made the most of what he could, especially dealing with the Jets. But hey, Joe Douglas, the big reputation from building a Super Bowl team from the draft class. I mean, he's done it once. So is he going to do it with the Jets? I mean, I'll never bet that in a million years, but that's what they tell me. That's what Joe Douglas was hired for, to build that team through the draft. And he got 21 picks in 2 years, 10 picks in the top 3 rounds in 2 years. So, I mean, right now, Joe Douglas has got to pull through.
Right. And I think what it is also, by building through the draft, you build sustainability. That way the Jets are not, a 2 years and done team like they were in the Fitzpatrick years. And that was their biggest problem. They had no answer at quarterback. Ryan Fitzpatrick was not going to be your franchise quarterback for the rest, of his career in the NFL. And I think that's what hurt them the most. Yes, any team can go out, sign a couple of guys, compete for a playoff spot, but the goal is to win a Super Bowl. And I don't care what any fan says. Yes, it's nice to have your team make the playoffs, but once you make the playoffs, you want to win a Super Bowl. That's always the main goal. That's what I want. I don't care. I mean, yes, it would be nice to see the Jets in the playoffs, but I want to see them go all the way. I don't want to see them, go to the wild card round and get knocked out. That doesn't bring me joy. It might be cool in the first year. Right. It might be cool in the first year because they haven't been there in a decade. But the next year, that doesn't do anything for me. I want to win, and this might be because I'm a Yankee fan, and it's always World Series or bust. But this is the mindset. You want to win it all every year. I don't care. I want to win every year, and that's what it does by building your team up through the draft. Yeah, I mean, Douglas could have went out, traded back with Sam, acquired all these draft picks, build up a team, and then sign like a veteran, quarterback like a Kirk Cousins or something. And yeah, maybe they would have went on a run, but do you think that team would be beating the Chiefs? Or
no one's touching the Chiefs right now. Yeah, no, right, Yeah, but if they kept Ronalds and then they traded back, it's still like you already have your still your franchise guy. He's 23. He's 23, which guys out of college come out their rookie year at 23. So I mean, there's still time to develop him. And if everyone's so high in LaFleur and so high in the new Jets coaching staff, why not keep him and then trade back a little bit, get a Devontae Smith, and who knows what else they would have gotten with trading back a little bit. They would have even more picks than they do now. Joe Douglas, the savant of drafting, so they should have put together a decent team around Darnold. And then I guess to your point before is the quarterback class next year is a little shaky. So, I mean, that's why I understand where you're coming from. Like, maybe you have to do it now. But that's kind of why – that was what I was holding on to in terms of keeping Darnold. Other ways around it, it looked like both parties need to split ways. I mean, I just think the Jets ruined Darnold, even though I think he's a top 15 talent in this league. And he can be developed the right way with the right talent around him. But, I mean, I thought that was just a decent way that the Jets could have went about it is keeping Darnold. He's still 23, trading back, get Devonta Smith, and who knows what else they could have got. Another offensive lineman. You have all these picks. You could have put together a decent team next year, and then that would have been the first year Darnold could have been evaluated. I understand it would have been his first year with the new system again, but I still think going that route, we could have actually judged Darnold because for the first 3 years of his career, no one has a right to judge him. No one has a right to critique him that he's a bust or he sucks, this and that, because any quarterback with the New York Jets would suck. If any quarterback in NFL history, if you set them up to fail, they will fail 100 out of 100 times. Actually, 101 times out of 100 times. Like, I don't think there's a quarterback in this league, including Patrick Mahomes, who could have led this Jets team to an 8-8 record. No way. They were terrible. Jameson Crowder is a number 3 to 4 wide receiver at best, not a number 1. But, I mean, Denzel Mims looked like a few games he was there, looked like he had some promise. But the offensive line was a disaster. Frank Gore is 55 years old. The defense was terrible. The secondary was beyond a disaster. I mean, what did people really expect from Darnold? And, again, they're 0-10 without him in 2018. Sure, I understand Luke Simeon or whatever his name is or whatever his name is, it was a disaster. I mean, the Jets had no backup quarterback. But, I mean, I think in 2018, McCown played a little bit, and they still didn't grab a win then. I mean, how much is there really to blame Darnold in reality?
Yeah, I mean, you could make that case and whatnot, but look at the NFL. It's such a quarterback-driven league that a franchise quarterback changes everything for you. Look at what Mahomes has done for the Chiefs. Look at what Lamar Jackson has done for the Ravens. Look at what Justin Herbert's done for the Chargers. Players want to play with a franchise quarterback. Now, think about it. If you're a free agent wide receiver and you have the chance to go to the Chargers or the Jets, you're going to pick the Chargers because of Justin Herbert. This is where guys want to be. Do you think the Jaguars hire Urban Meyer and get him out of retirement with all his health conditions if they don't have the number 1 pick? He's not coming back to coach, Zach Wilson or Justin Fields. He's coming back to, coach Trevor Lawrence, who is being praised as, the next Peyton Manning and the next Andrew Luck.
Could have been a Jet.
Right, no, but I'm saying, but that's what a franchise quarterback does. Now, if Zach Wilson comes in, right, and plays out of his mind, right? How good does that look when the Jets need to get to free agency and need guys to come? We saw it with Tampa and Tom Brady. Tom Brady replaced Jameis Winston, right? But how many players then said, I'm going to take less money and go to Tampa? NFL is a hard cap, right? So this isn't the NBA where, you can make things work with money and whatnot. Guys took less money to go play with Tom Brady and go chase after a ring. And that's what you want to build. You want guys who want to come to your organization who will give up money, because at the end of the day, it's all about the money and all about staying under the cap, and try to win a ring. Think about it. Sue, I think, is only making $10 million next year. He had a phenomenal season. There's no way if he gets to the open market, teams are giving him way more than $10 million. But it's all about sustainability and having a franchise quarterback. Once you have that guy, it changes the whole dynamic of your team. And with the coaching staff and everything, I think that's what the Jets are trying to build. Finally, enough with the quick. It's like in what movie was it? This Is the End, when there's a big crack in the wall and he takes a piece of duct tape and puts it over. That's not fixing anything, and that's what the Jets try to do time and time again. And I think they're finally building the right way. Yes, it sucks for Sam. no play on words because, the hashtag was suck for Sam when he was coming out of college. But he got put in a bad situation. He regressed each year. Like, there were times where he got outplayed by the corpse of Joe Flacco. You know what I mean? So I think everybody need a fresh start without a doubt. And I'm happy for Sam. I would always love Sam because I'm a USC fan. So it was nice to see him come to the Jets, but it was time for everybody to move on. I get he's still young, but it might be to a point where Sam, might not be fixable. And I don't think the Jets can sit around and wait to see that because of the opportunity they're given. When's the next time the Jets are drafting second? Hopefully it's not for right, but hopefully they're not picking, top 3, until I'm like, gone off the world, and my great grandkids, are Jet fans and they're watching. That's what I hope for. But I want to see this team be consistent and at the top of the AFC East. Think about it. No more Brady for us. How many times were we terrored? Yes, the Jets are good, but the Patriots, are still the big dog atop the AFC East. So I want to see the Jets be that team atop the division, atop of the conference, atop of the league, year in and year out.
Did the Jets get enough in return from Darnold?
When it was rumored that Darnold was going to be traded, I think the obvious answer was to look at what the Cardinals got for Rosen, because it was kind of like the same scenario in a way. And I know Darnold had, more years of NFL experience than Rosen, but I think they should have gotten at least a 2, in which they did, and then probably a little bit more than a 5, in which they did by getting the 4 and then the 6th rounder this year. So I think it was fair compensation. I was holding out and, fingers crossed they would have got, number 1 from either maybe the Saints or the Steelers or even the Redskins, or even the Bears, teams that are desperate for a quarterback. But Darnold's play, they couldn't justify a team giving up a number 1 pick. So listen, I'm happy they got the 2 and the additional picks. I was a little, what's the word I'm looking for? I was a little intrigued as to why Douglas opted for the picks for next year, but I think it is because of what I mentioned before. You don't want all your picks in the same year because you kind of want to spread it out a little bit, especially if, players become available that you like in the future. So that's my only reasoning, unless somebody else has, heard from somewhere else. But today they said that Carolina's initial offer was only a 4th round pick. So think about how the Jets build up, to get in the package that they did from just a 4th rounder. I'm sure teams were knocking down their door, to get Sam. So I think the Jets did all right given the circumstances. They held on to him a little bit too long, which might have hurt, but they wanted to wait for the medical reviews on Wilson, which came back clean, thank God. So I think that was when it was time to make that move.
Again, Darnold is 13-25 as the Jets starting quarterback, but they are 0-10 without him, and you have to take into account how inferior the talent was around him. He had absolutely nothing to work with. And even though he was regarded as the most talented quarterback coming out of the draft, flashing back to 2018. So I think you got to take that into consideration as well. But I mean, for them giving up 2 second-round picks to move up 3 spots to get him, thinking that he's going to be their guy for the next 15 to 20 years. And everyone's like, oh, we got our guy for the next 15 years. No doubt about it. He's the next Joe Namath. The curse is over, this and that. And then you trade him 4 years later, and you only get a 2nd, 4th, and 6th-round pick. Again, how valuable is a 4th and 6th-round pick? Sure, 3 picks looks quote-unquote sexy on paper, but what are those players going to turn into? And I already talked about what the Jets draft picks have been from 2008 to 2018. None of them are on the roster, and none of them lasted 5 years with the organization to begin with. So, I mean, how valuable is that at the end of the day?
I think the biggest mistake is not that they moved up to get Darnold, is that what they did around him. Like, they had a terrible GM. They hired a horrific head coach. And I don't think anybody would have succeeded. And we saw it in Miami with Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill, was not a good quarterback. I ripped him time and time again. Then he went to Tennessee under Arthur Smith, and he finally, got everything in his head clicking. And I hope that's what happens with Sam, because I like Sam as a player, but he was never destined for greatness with what they did. And we saw it. How many holes did they have on this roster? He wasn't going to, do anything with that. And Adam Gase ran, last place offenses both years he was a head coach. So listen, the NFL is all about, motion on offense and moving around, and Adam Gase refused to do it because he's stubborn. He's stubborn, and Darnold is not that seasoned vet who can kind of, maneuver around, a bad system. Absolutely not. And I think that's what he fell in, that's what he fell into. He was trapped and no way out. So, yeah, it does suck, but this is why it's so important to have the correct system in place. Think about Kansas City, right? If they didn't have Andy Reid and everything, do you think Mahomes would be what Mahomes is today? I mean, yes, Mahomes is a phenomenal talent. Don't get me wrong, but don't you think there's a little coaching up from that with Andy Reid? Right, exactly. Now, do you think if Patrick Mahomes, was drafted by the Jets or even Lamar Jackson or whoever else, do you think that Adam Gase would have coached these guys up to win an MVP or win a Super Bowl? Hell no, they would not be what they are today. So sometimes it goes back to the right fit and the right system and the right scheme.
That's going to wrap up in terms of our Sam Darnold trade talk. But one last topic. I mean, the New York Mets. What do you know? DeGrom, opening day for the Mets. I mean, he was shoving. He dealed. The Phillies could not put – they just looked like helpless up there. They looked like they had no fighter's chance. DeGrom hit 102 at one point. His last pitch hitting 101. Comes out at 76 pitches. And then the Mets do the New York Mets. They do what the only one of the three guarantees in life, death, taxes, and blowing a DeGrom lead. What are your thoughts on the Mets taking DeGrom out? Should they have kept him in? Should you ride him out? Or first start, you got to watch the pitch count?
I think first start after a COVID-plagued year with a possible mega extension on the horizon, you kind of want to play carefully. But now I didn't watch the game because I was busy working, so I didn't see how DeGrom was pitching. But if he's, breezing through the lineup, like you just said, there's no reason to keep him out there. Yeah, you want to, I know pitchers nowadays, once they get to 100, the bullpen's already warming up. But if he's just doing his thing and, there aren't any stressful innings or stressful pitches, what I think we should be looking at, then let him keep pitching. If he's in a groove, why would you even remove him? But I understand where the Mets are coming from, but this is going to be their biggest problem. And I said it before the season even started. Yes, the Mets could be a good team, but it's going to come down to their bullpen. And if they can't, hold on to leads like this, then they're not going to go anywhere. And we saw it yesterday, had another DeGrom start ruined by the bullpen. Now, I guess you can make the argument, yes, they should have kept him in, but it's kind of like, hindsight 2020. If May, right, he was the guy who blew it for them. If May goes out there and shuts down the Phillies, and then Diaz comes in, gets the save and whatnot, then we're not having this discussion. But because it blew up in their faces, this is a talking point. But I think, you want to save DeGrom is the best pitcher in the MLB, hands down, right? And you don't want to risk anything. Now, maybe if last year he got his full workload in, I guess you could, be a little bit more you give him a little bit of a longer leash. But, I mean, you don't want to put the risk at that. And when the Yankees had Colin the other day, he was around 80, 85 pitches in the fifth inning. And I was like, I think they should pull him. Even though he was pretty much dealing, I was like, this isn't a guy you want, 100 pitches first day, because you want these guys to pitch 200 innings throughout the year. So I can't blame the Mets because it's saving DeGrom is their franchise. Without him, they aren't nowhere near a playoff team, in my opinion. So they're looking over the long haul. And like I said, if the Mets win that game, we're not having this conversation.
Of course. The thing with the Mets is that's always been their issue. I mean, they have talent up and down their lineup. They have a great rotation. They have the best pitcher in the game. I mean, adding Francisco Lindor to that lineup, who is a superstar in my eyes. You have Pete Alonso. You have Michael Conforto. You have all these guys in the lineup. And it's them not being able to close out ball games. And if you don't have a good bullpen, you can never be successful in this league. But, I mean, it's his first start. If you want to go back to the COVID year, though, they had less starts. It's saving his arm. That's about 12. That's about, I forget, I don't know how many starts he had last year, but on average, that should be about 12 starts for him and a team that didn't make the playoffs. But the Mets are a team who they're projected to win the NL East. They are projected to win the NL East. And there are people out there who are making assumptions that they will be chasing the NL pennant to win the pennant. So if that's the case, I mean, your horse has got to go out, and that's got to be a W. Every night DeGrom takes the mounds, got to be a W. And in terms of his pitch count, limiting his pitch count, that's got to be on him. That should not be a manager telling you what to do. We don't like when the governor tells us what to do. The pitcher couldn't be told what his coaches want from him in terms of when he has to come out or how long he wants to stay in. That should be on him. If he is not having any stressful innings, if he is cruising like he did, ride him out. When he says, nah, I'm done, then you take his word, I'm done. He's the best pitcher in the game by a wide margin. So he needs to be the one to say, it's no more for me. Like I did my work, or no, I'm cruising. I'm finishing this game out. It's one. I think he could have started the 7th inning. If you're at 76 pitches, start it. I like the idea. If you walk a guy or you let up a leadoff hit, you're out. But in terms of they weren't touching him. I mean, he was messing around with the slider, didn't really use a curveball, didn't really use a changeup, and he's fanning guys. He has a different type of 101. 102 that he ended up hitting yesterday. He has that late life that guys just can't catch up to. I mean, even the few base hits the Phillies had were defenseless swings. Awful swings, rather. If he is cruising, you got to let him tell the call. He's the only person who knows how Jacob deGrom is feeling is Jacob deGrom. That's the moral of my point I'm trying to make right here. If he feels good, if he wants to stay in the game, he's got to stay in the game. If you see something that he's a little rattled or his fastball's dropping or he's losing his command and you want to yank him, sure. But if he's that successful, I mean, you have to let him. You have to ride him out because games like this for a team like the New York Mets are going to be crucial down the stretch for a team who is obviously a non-successful franchise. I made the playoffs in 2016. He did make the World Series in 2015. But if they want to get back to that, every night DeGrom gets on the mound and has a quality start, which he's breaking records for that aspect. I mean, that's got to be a win. And I saw a stat that I believe DeGrom is like 36-41 in his career starts at the Mets when his ERA is close to below 2. That says enough. I rest my I don't know what else to say.
Now, you are right about, DeGrom should be feeling what he's feeling, when he's out there pitching. But sometimes you got to protect a pitcher against themselves. I'm a competitor. Brandon, I'm sure you're a competitor. I'm sure all these aces in the MLB, are competitors and they want to pitch until their arm falls off. But we've seen time and time again, that doesn't work out too well for the pitcher in the end. And the Met fans that are complaining should just look back to Matt Harvey in the playoffs where he wanted to go back out for another inning, coming off the injury and everything, and he got hurt. And that was basically the end of the Dark Knight era in New York City. You know what I mean? I know DeGrom's a smarter pitcher than Harvey, and he doesn't have, he's not coming off the injuries and whatnot. But you want DeGrom pitching for you game 1 of the playoffs rather than a measly start on April 5th. Think about it. Baseball is a long season. You're going to have, your ups and your downs. You're going to go on your winning streaks, your losing streaks. But as long as DeGrom's healthy for game 1 in October, that's all you should be worried about.
You got to get there. You got to get there, though. And the way I understand is DeGrom winning games.
Right, I understand, but this is just game of 1 of 162. Like DeGrom's going to have to start battling now in the dog days of summer. Going out there pitching in this New York City humidity where it might be like 90, but it feels like 102. Right? But I mean, I have no problem with them, trying to save his arm. Yeah, he probably could have went out through another, 10, 20 pitches and got through the 7th. But, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and cry about it. The Mets need a bullpen. We know it. Everybody's been saying it since before the season started. So if you're going to complain every time DeGrom gets taken out, well, guess what? Go out and get the bullpen arms. The Phillies had the worst bullpen in the league last year. I think they had like a 70 ERA at worst. It was probably even higher. And what did they do? They went out and they overhauled their entire pen. That's what the Mets need to do. I don't even think I can name 4 relievers in the Mets bullpen without saying, Diaz, right? I think they got Betances, who is like, yeah, right. They got May, who looked to be like a nice pickup. Yeah, he blew his first game, but it's just still game 1. And I don't even know who else. Seth Lugo's hurt. But that's what the Mets, they need the bullpen arms. They did good in all the other areas of their team. They added a superstar in Francisco Lindor. They added rotation depth behind DeGrom and Stroman and Noah, who was hurt, they got, Taiwan Walker, Joey Lucchese, Jordan Yamamoto. They added good flexibility on their bench and in their upper minors. But what did they do to go out and fix the bullpen? I think teams always need about 4 to 5 guys to have a successful bullpen. And look at the Yankees. Yes, they have Chad Green, Zach Britton, Aroldis Chapman, but I still think they need another guy to come in. All right, I don't want to, and hopefully Michael King's that guy, but I think it goes to show you need the bullpen, especially with guys only going 5 innings. Your bullpen becomes even that more of an importance because you're going to be using them night in and night out. We aren't seeing complete games anymore. We aren't seeing starters go, 7 innings, then you hand it over to, your set man, your closer, and that's it. Right. Guys are coming out 4th or 5th inning. Tyler Glass now isn't even allowed to pitch more than like 80 pitches or go past the 5th inning. So that's when when Glass now's on the mound, Tampa's using their bullpen. As soon as about, the 6th, 7th inning, they're already into their bullpen. So I think that's why we got to put so much emphasis on bullpen, and the Mets didn't do that.
That's all I have to say. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. NFL draft in 3 weeks.
Oh, yeah. Catch you soon.
It's the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.